If you could snap your fingers and think about how we train future designers, 20 years from now, like what would you want designers to be able to know and do to be able to create the kinds of products that you would dream of?
I think it will be like being the best at empathy in the world and do it in a way that is programmatic, meaning they can be repeated, it's measurable, and also that is spoken or is able to be framed in terms of trade-offs. Hi everybody, this is Hector. I'm a designer at Google, I'm a failed engineer and a failed artist, but a designer at heart. I'm here with a friend of mine, Cynthia, Dr. Cynthia. She is a professor at the MIT Media Lab and she directs the Personal Robot Group.
It's great to be here, Hector.
So let's start with something simple. Does technology feel personal to you?
So I would say that technology feels personal in that I own it. I don't feel that technology feels personal like it really knows me or it's adapting to me in a meaningful way. It's still largely a tool that I use and that I own. So I would say that's how it feels personal. But a lot of what I try to do in my work is to create technologies that can actually build a relationship with you and feels like a more personal relationship. So it's a different kind of experience with technology. When a technology really feels that it can adapt to you, that it can understand you in a much more humanistic way, I think that's when we'll start to feel like we can use technology to really help us towards, I would say, more deeply human goals, like the ability to stay healthier or be emotionally resilient or to learn something new. So kind of different kinds of applications than getting the weather or checking our stock report or things like that.
That resonates a lot. I think that when I try to explain technology to my daughter, Ana Julia, is always like very similar. It's a tool, and I usually use her bike. Like we bought her bike, and it was pink, because she liked pink, and then she hated pink. In a way to personalize that tool, we have to buy a really crappy paint and spray it. And then we have to put flowers all over it, and we need to break a few things. And that moment, that tool started to feel hers. I do believe that extra step of adapting, in this case something very simple as a bike, to someone's liking is something that I admire from your work, and is some of the things I'm trying to also push at Google, in where it's something that trying to do it at scale is hard. Because I work with a lot of smart people, but they are mostly driven by building more bicycles. And building the personalization, like making a bicycle red to pink, sadly, is not yet understood as important as building other bicycles, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm curious, so as a designer who is, working with amazing technical people and so forth, if there was one thing that you could convince people they need to do differently or think differently, what would that be?
That's a really good question. I think that will be that at the end, we are all people, and emotion drives most of us. And for some of the upbringing and education that we have, sadly, we don't have enough maturity in those fields to be as good as regular science or engineering. Because I don't believe that we're able to measure as good as we're able to measure other things, emotion. And that will be that. Like, they are amazing engineers, so they feel and they know what they like. They feel, right? And then that fuzziness around that is what makes engineers or product managers very uncomfortable. Because when they cannot measure it, they don't know how to improve it. And they don't know how to improve it, they don't know how to build it at scale. And to be fair, I've experienced this since my failed career over time. I started as an engineer, I finished it just because my dad wanted me to do it. And then I ended up wanting to go to arts, but I also failed because my mom tried to do it. I actually ended up in the MIT. I worked there for 2 years in the media lab. And then it was the same thing. Always you have these really rational, incredible, smart, articulated people, and then on the other side is you. It's me with this fuzzy feeling thing, and I usually lose the battle, but I never give up. So that will be my advice, like your people too.
I totally agree. So, I work in AI and robotics, but the nature of the technology I build is just so fundamentally different, right? So in my area of AI and robotics, the assumption is, intelligence is about purely cognitive things, right? Decision support tools, decision making, learning and things like that. But my area of robotics and AI is building technologies that actually interact with people. And the question of how do you create an autonomous robot, for instance, that can interact with anyone, whether you're a child or an older adult, this question of what's the intuitive interface, came in my work very early, and I decided from the very beginning, the social and emotional aspects of communication are really where it begins, right? So I read a lot of developmental psychology on how does our social and emotional intelligence develop, and they talk about communication as a dance, right? So when we think about how we even talk to our voice interfaces today, it's largely like playing chess, right? It's like I say something, it says something, I command, it responds. But that's nothing like how people communicate and have a meaningful connection and build rapport. That is this fluid interplay of not only what we say, but how we say it, and our gestures and our facial expressions and our body gestures, and all these things are orchestrated in this very fine-grained temporal dance, and that's where the emotional connection and the rapport and that sense of you're an ally, all of those things come from that dance of communication. So a lot of my challenge has been trying to build technologies that are capable of engaging us in that dance. And I feel, it's interesting, as a woman in this field, right? So I'm recognized as, a pioneer of this field of social robotics. My colleague here at the Media Lab has recognized Rosalind Picard as the pioneer and founder of the field of affective computing. So it's interesting that women professors are the ones who are kind of pioneering bringing this emotional interpersonal experience into technology. And we do it because we absolutely understand in order to engage and motivate and inspire people, to engage people in a way that they can become who they aspire to be, it's not just about cognition, right? You have to engage people on multiple dimensions. And I would say, it's certainly cognitive, it's absolutely social, it's absolutely emotional, and even like physical, right? It's like the more you can engage us as a holistic experience, the more we can engage. And not surprisingly, we can show this in like scientific studies, the more successful people are, with these technologies. So I think your point is spot on. And, even when I think about the broader field, I feel like I'm very much still fighting this uphill battle to say these other dimensions of human experience, the emotional connection, the social connection, matters even when we think about how we interact, not only through technology, but with technology.
No, totally. And I love that metaphor of the dance. And it's something that resonates so much. And I agree with you that if I wish will become true for me right now, will be to have more women leaders like you and others. It's just to have this amazing, I do believe there's a much better sensitivity, articulation to the problem that we're trying to solve here. And I'm always in awe in the ability to unpack that in ways that it will resonate with the audience. And I think the dance metaphor is, I was just thinking about it right now, and it's like, it suddenly feels like if we're having a party and we have different beats, the job as technology, as the rational people see it, is to dance all the songs in the same beat, in the same way, right? And they don't really step back and question, well, why would people want to dance? Why are they tired? Why are they want closer? And further, what is a tango? What's different from hip hop? And that nuance that makes us human and makes us hate and love each other so much is what we're completely ignoring in technology, because we're just busy making more tracks. We're busy putting people in the dance floor, but we're not busy saying, hey, what if we lower the lights? And what if we lower the volume, right? Stuff like that. I think that it's even harder when right now I'm talking to you, I see your gestures, although we were supposed not to move because we have special microphones. It just makes our conversation so much lively. But when there's just voice, and right now it's so, the very beginnings in voice interfaces, it's a huge disappointment when things don't happen because we don't take this nuance in consideration. Yesterday, an example, I was teaching my daughter how to dance Macarena. You know, the one that goes like this and you do it like that. I was saying, hey, okay, Google, play Macarena, and he played, right? And then she tried it, and she said, okay, we'll play Macarena, and it didn't work, right? And then it didn't work, and it didn't work, and then she said, okay, play Macarena, like with an accent from English native speakers. We were not, and it worked. And then she was telling me, hey, why is that lady doesn't understand the correct way of saying Macarena? And I said, I don't know, it's my fault because I work on that. I'm sorry about that. But it's just those limitations, and without any way to frame it in a way that makes sense to her, it drives to immediate disappointment. And then she's like, screw that. And she goes away. And when I try to have the conversation with my partners that build these products, they're like, well, she's not the majority, or well, that's hard. That's gonna take forever. We're like focused on making sure that people can ask more questions. So that's usually some of my headwinds.
Yeah, so for me, because I mean, I'm at MIT, I'm an educator, right? I'm at an academic institution. I think quite a lot about, you know, the reality that AI is getting out there, pervading all these different kinds of products and services, you know, in our personal lives and our professional lives. Like your daughter, right? Kids are using these technologies. They don't even realize they're interacting with AI, you know, but, you know, these systems, as we're hearing more and more through the media, that the data that they're used to train are not necessarily representative of the people who are trying to use these technologies. So you don't have the same kind of performance like you've already talked about with your daughter. And it's just, you know, for me, it just makes it so clear that we really have to do something about making sure the people who are designing and engineering these next generation solutions need to be far more diverse. We need a far more diverse and inclusive group of people who are designing these technologies. And I think we need to really reconsider how to educate and train them differently. So, you know, for me and my group, my graduate students, they're involved in all aspects. I have students who are, you know, exceptional in the technical skills and the machine learning and so forth, but they are also designing user studies and interviewing people and analyzing data to understand the human experience. So even though they're technical, they are getting experience on more of the design side of the house, and vice versa. Our designers are also learning about technology and trying to do interface design and trying to understand something about the technical aspects. So I think the more that we can kind of educate and train people to be able to at least really understand and value, and I think to your point, value these other perspectives is really important. I'm curious, like if you think about, if you could snap your fingers and think about how we train future designers, you know, 20 years from now, like what would you want designers to be able to know and do to be able to create the kinds of products that you would dream of?
That's an awesome question. I think it will be like being the best at empathy in the world and do it in a way that is programmatic, meaning they can be repeated, it's measurable, and also that is spoken or is able to be framed in terms of trade-offs. Because I do believe what you just mentioned requires that diversity, usually spoken in a more softer way, like, oh, diversity, we should all be diverse because everybody is different and all that, which everybody embraces. But when things get real, when you need to spend the hour or the minute of your day, you have to pick, right? You have choices. Should I do the thing that I'm really good at? Or should I actually embrace this other thing that I don't know, but probably is gonna be a waste of my time? And I do believe that empathy in that way, when it's understood and rigorously followed, because it also implies there has to be some conceding of power. Power is mostly held in the majorities, in the majority of whatever, right? They held the power, they held the attention, they held how things get reviewed or approved or internalized or broadcast. So imagine a student in 20 years from now acknowledging that she or he has an amount of power, and then she or he needs to let it go a little bit, so then the other person that is not there can be part of the conversation. So I wish we had more of that. I feel like nowadays it's very uncomfortable to speak about power that someone may have. And I think many of us just have it because we inherit it, or where we live, or where we study, or what we like. And I think without that acknowledgement, it's gonna be hard to make products that resonate with more people. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Oh, it makes complete sense to me. Very much on the same page with you.